been just tired, burned out, wore out? I think too often we classify a lot of the conditions as burnout when really it's not burnout so much as it's just overwhelmed. I think of burnout like you've been eating the same food every single day for months straight, right? Let's say like you eat oatmeal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 and 4 months at a time, and you're just burnt out with oatmeal. You're not, I mean, it's not like you don't like oatmeal or you don't want to eat oatmeal, but you want something different than what you've been feeling and what you've been tasting and what you've been feeding on. And the place where you're at, you're just plain tired of it. That's what I think of burnout. I think sometimes people think burnout is a place where you're just wanting to give up, and you feel that way, but deep down inside, true Christians, deep down inside, those who are sold out, they don't want to give up. They're just tired of being in the place where they're at, and they are exhausted. They're tired and well doing, so to speak. So if that fits you this morning or today rather, stay tuned to this because it's going to really probably uh, feed your soul this morning. So anyway, so I've been in ministry for a very long time, and I've done a lot of different things in ministry. I've done whatever my pastor asked me to do. You know, I was very willing to do whatever he needed, and that's the way we ought to be, right? And there's times where you just get tired and you get burned out and you're not encouraged and you're not even excited about the ministry anymore. And even though you still want to do those things for God and still want to be there for God, but you're just at a place where you're just burnt out. You know, you're tired. Uh, I think about wearing different hats, right? I wear a bunch of different hats myself, and I don't typically wear hats, but I do have a bunch of hats. It's kind of crazy. Um, I like the way hats look. I just don't really want to wear them all the time. But anyways, I just got a brand new hat yesterday, and I'm so thankful for it because I want to support the Koontz school district and everything. So I asked for one of their hats. The baseball coach was able to get us one, and a friend of mine actually purchased it for me. He wanted to support the team, but he also wanted to get me a hat. So I'm very thankful for that. So, and I will wear it. Anyways, but we wear a bunch of different hats. So I've got this one here, and this is I don't wear this one hardly often, but you see, we wear a bunch of different hats. You know, we wear this hat, and you know, this might be our fun hat. You know, where we just want to go around and do something and have fun. And but then we got to take this hat off, and we've got to put this one on here because now we got to go to work. This is the work hat, or whatever the case is. You know, because you know my line of work outside of the church, you know, obviously is. I have to wear a hard hat, yeah, every day, all day, most of the time. Well, not quite all day, but anytime I go into the units and stuff, and I have to wear a hard hat. But then, you know, we put on those hats, but we think that that's what we want to be like, you know, and you see how the hat changes the personality of the person. When you look at them, you think that's not the person I was looking at just a few minutes ago. And we put all these different hats on. We wear these different hats, and here's my fun hat. This is my favorite, I guess, of all my hats. Is this means I'm going to the golf course, you know. So, and I like this one. It don't mess my hair up, and I can wear it, and it keeps the sun out of my eyes, and it's definitely for me playing golf. So I love this one hat. I don't get to wear it as often as I would like, but you know. And then you've got those hats that everyone wants to give you. You know, you get those hats, and I like to do some. My wife can't stand this, but and my middle brother used to do this. I've never worn this hat. It looks like my middle brother used to always wear his hat like this, backwards, and you know, and as we were growing up, this was thuggish. I guess is the way it was called. My mom used to say that. You look like a thug. Well, and they'd wear them sideways. My brother, trying to be cool, down like that. If you're going out and playing some ball, you put it forward. But I mean, we have all kinds of different hats. And then, this one here is a hat of necessity, right? This one I'm fixing to put on, I have to wear this one out of necessity for the activity that I'm going to do, So this one here is my motorcycle riding helmet. If I'm going on the bike, I'm going to put this hat on and this helmet. So there's a bunch of different hats we wear as Christians, as ministers, as lay people in the church. We wear a bunch of different hats, and sometimes you're so busy trying to grab this hat, and then you're trying to put this one on, take this one off, and then next thing you know, you're back here trying to put this one on, and you really want to wear this one right here. And all the time, you feel like you're just being pulled from one way or the other, from this place and that place, and you're stressed and you're overwhelmed and you're exhausted, and then your health is you're having struggles with your health, and you just think, I don't know how I'm going to make it, how I'm going to get over this thing, and how am I going to overcome some of this, and it's just piling on top, on top, on top, on top of you, and you're just at a point of just throwing your hands up and giving up. Well, luckily and thankfully, the Lord has given us some scriptures to help encourage us when we get in those times, So let's go to the book of Job, here, Job in chapter 1. And I like this. We pretty much all know the story of Job. We all know the story of Job, and he was, well, if you don't know the story of Job, Job was tried and found faithful. And here in the story, we're going to read just a small segment of it. I encourage you to go back and read it, because there's a lot that goes on in Job. There's a lot that happens where Job is faced with death and loss, and friends turn against him, and his wife is encouraging him just to give up and curse God and die. And it's almost like Job is just by himself trying to make it, trusting God, but just overwhelmed by all these feelings. Job gets to a place where he even curses the day he was born because of the stress that he was under and the difficulties he went through. But, the good thing about us having the Word of God is we're able to go from the beginning of the story to where all the turmoil and stuff happens, and we can flip a few pages and find the end of the story and see how Job was blessed. But the difference is when we're in our life, when we're sitting in our circumstances and in our turmoil, and we're juggling all these different hats, and we're trying to do all these things for God, we can't see the end, right? We know there's a good end. We anticipate a good end. We expect a good outcome. But in the moment, you're just exhausted. You can't even think about where is it going, what's happening on the other side of this. So we can go to the Word of God and be encouraged and reminded that even though we can't see the end, God can, and He knows where we're at. And I want to encourage you that wherever you're at right now, whatever you're going through in this moment, it's not catching God by surprise. I think sometimes we think God is not aware of what's going on in our life. Does He not know I'm struggling? And all this overwhelmness comes in our minds. But let's read this, and this will encourage you to know that God is fully aware of where you're at, and there's a reason for what He's allowing to happen in your life. And what that reason is sometimes the purpose of finding out why you're in it, So let's read it. Job chapter 1, there, starting with verse 6. And it says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord." Now the sons of God are the angels that God created. And it says here, and Satan came also among them. And a lot of people are like, what? Satan came to heaven and presented? Well, yeah, I mean, he was created by God also. He was the angel of music, and he's still required to present himself to God, so he is still under submission to God. Even though he's rebellion, he still has to obey and submit to God. So, and that's encouraging in itself to know that no matter what you're at, no matter how Satan's buffeting you and however he's discouraging you, he is still having to submit to God. But listen here, verse 7 says, And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered, and the Lord said, Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job? Now, in my Bible, I have the King James Fire Bible. There's a little underscore number 1 here, and I looked over here on verse number 8, and it says that hast thou considered my servant is really translated to be, hast thou set thy heart on my servant. So, even though it sounds like maybe God's saying, what about Job? But it also could be meaning, have you set your heart on Job to, attack him? That there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. Then Satan answered the Lord. So Satan's like, yeah, I've considered Job, but here's why I can't do anything. He says, doth Job fear God for naught? Has not thou made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? God has protected him, right? God's blocked out the enemy. Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thy hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself, but not put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Now, I'm not going to read what happens after that. I want you to go back and read that. But Satan had to go before God and present his case before God in an effort to, be able to go against Job. And the truth of the matter is that Satan has to go on a regular basis before God. So let's jump to chapter 2 there, and it says, And again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. So again, Satan has to come again before the Lord. So this wasn't like a one-time occurrence. Satan has to go before God continuously, like the rest of the angels do, present his cases before the Lord and get permission to attack. Now you say, well, why does a good God allow us to be attacked? Well, listen, God is just, and everything he does is just. We are finite. We can only think in the moments and the past experiences we've had. We cannot see the future. God is not only in the past, he's also in the future, all in the same time, because God's outside of time. God is not controlled by time. So to try to understand why God does some things, we're trying to have that in turn creates in us a mindset of trying to be as God, because we want to have full understanding of who God is and full understanding of everything about God and why he does it. The Word of God tells us that his ways are above our ways, his thoughts above our thoughts. We'll never comprehend the fullness of God, and rightfully so. We are the creation. He is the creator. Why is the creation questioning the creator? You're right. So anyways, Satan had to get permission to attack Job. Now, granted, we can flip the chapters, right? We can go to the end of the book and we can see, or end of the chapter of Job and the book of Job, and see where Job overcomes and Job is blessed, doubled blessed, more abundantly than he was before. And that's the good news for us. Like, we can flip and see the encouragement there, right? But when you're in the situation you're in, you're not able to see that, right? Well, let's go to Kings, because this is kind of like a scenario where we can see that happening, right? Elijah in the Mount mountain in the mountain, found in the mountain. Now, what happened is that Elijah was found on the mountain with all the prophets of Baal, and they called down fire from heaven. Now, the short of the long of it is this: is that Elijah told the prophets and Ahab, King Ahab, he said, "Hey, whoever's God, let him be God. If your God's God, then let it be God. But if the God I serve is God, let him be God. And whichever God answers by fire, let that be God." And the prophets of Baal, and they sat there all day long, crying out to their God and cutting themselves and just hooping and hollering. And Elijah, I don't know, in my mind and imagination, I see things kind of like this. I see Elijah just laughing and he mocks them. He tells them, "Hey, call out loud, or maybe your God's asleep, or maybe he's on a long journey away or something, you know." And Elijah says a short prayer, and first he resets up the altar. He reforms the sacrifice. He covers the sacrifice with barrels of water. He digs a trench until the trench is full of water, and Elijah says a simple prayer, and God answers by fire. He even licks up the water. He takes up the altar. He takes up the sacrifice, and boom, he's God, right? Well, then all of the prophets and all of the King Ahab and all of them, they were like, "This is God. They're worshiping God." Well, Elijah slays all the prophets of Baal. In my imagination, I think, well, maybe at least they're saved. They turned their hearts to God, and Elijah took them out, right? And then Jezebel, the queen, now is mad because all of her prophets and soothsayers and all them guys that really make her money, are dead. So she's after Elijah. She's already attacked all of the other prophets, and Elijah's on the run. And that's how Elijah ends up in this cave, right? So Elijah's in this cave, and he is just bombarded. He's overwhelmed. He's burned out, maybe. And you think this man who just called down fire, and we say just because we can read it in just a few verses, but it's probably several days that have gone by for him to call fire down to him getting in his cave. But you think that this man who's able to call out God to call fire down from heaven and lap up the water and the sacrifice and the altar would have enough encouragement, enough strength, and enough power to overcome Jezebel's threats, right? Well, guess what? Elijah is human. He's a man, just like you and I are human. He is affected the same way we are, and he has emotions, and he has stress, and everything that you and I struggle with. He had the same thing, maybe in a different fashion. Maybe the culture was set up a little different, but he still faced very similar things. So, in the grand scheme of things, he feels exactly like you do. He's in this cave. He's having a hideout. He's on the run. And I read one commentary that says that this is the cave of Mount Sinai. The cave's inside of Mount Sinai, which was rather interesting to know that, because that's where the mountain that Moses receives the Ten Commandments. That's where the mountain that Moses sees the burning bush that it's not burned up or consumed. So it's a rather interesting statement to say that. But so Elijah's there, and God speaks. So keep that in mind. God speaks, and it says in verse 19 of 1 Kings 19. Says, "And he came thither," that's Elijah, "he came thither unto a cave, and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him." Now Elijah's on the run. He's depressed. He's upset. He's anxious. He's stressed. He doesn't know one way from the other. But it says, in the midst of all that, the Lord spoke. And for the Lord to speak, and Elijah said, I have been very jealous. Oh, and back up, I skipped the spot. It says, and the Lord came unto him, and he said unto him, what doest thou here, Elijah? What doest thou here, Elijah? Do you think that God was asking him, why are you in this mountain, Elijah? Or was God saying, Elijah, why are you in this place internally? Why are you in a place of distress? Why are you in a place of uncertainty? Why are you in a place of give up, burnout? Maybe that's what God was asking. It doesn't very clearly say that, and we kind of read into it as in a physical environment place. Maybe it was a spiritual, emotional place that Elijah was at, and God was saying, what are you doing in this place? Why are you staying in this place of emotional distress? Almost as if Elijah has the choice to remain in that place of distress, in that place of emotional breakdown, in that place of burnout, as if it's his choice. Let's read on, and it says this, and he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thy altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left. So that if you read all of that, it's Elijah saying how he feels. I'm upset because I'm the only one left. I'm the only one that hasn't stopped worshiping you. I'm the only one who isn't been killed. I'm the only one who has kept the covenant. And I have been very jealous. In other words, I have been just very hungry after all the things of God. And he said, here's what God says. And he said, go forth and stand upon the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. Okay, so he's telling, so we know Elijah's in the cave. So he's saying, go forth, go out and stand on the outside of the mountain. And I want you to pay attention to that, because it shows there's something in here that Elijah doesn't quite do that. He don't quite go out. But let's listen. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, break in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it. So Elijah, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entry of the cave. So Elijah didn't have fear because the mighty wind blew. Elijah didn't have fear because there was a mighty earthquake. Elijah didn't have fear because there was a fire. But when the Lord's voice spoke, Elijah had fear and covered himself. And then, it says, and then he went out and stood in the entry of the cave. So the Lord had told him before, come out to the mountain, come out of the cave, come onto the mountain, right? And Elijah at some point went forward, it appears, but he didn't go all the way out. He didn't commit to do what the Lord called him to do and asked him to do. And then the Lord, all these events happened, and then it was a small, still voice that brought reverence and peace to Elijah. And the truth of the matter is we're all wearing all these hats. No matter what hat we got on, we're trying to wear all these hats, and we're looking for an earthquake, earth shaking. We're looking for a mountain moving, wind blowing, fire falling, great revival to happen in our life. And God's saying, I just want to speak to you in such a small, still voice. But you can't hear God because sometimes we get so far away. And I don't mean like you've gone off and done all these great big sins. I'm not meaning that. Maybe you are there. Maybe you need to come back. But we get so far away internally because we've got all these things going on. We're trying to wear this hat and we're trying to put this one on and we really want to be here and we can't get nothing done and we can't hear God speak. And he's saying, listen, you can't hear me speak if all you can hear is the wind, all you can hear is the fire, and all you can hear is the earth shake. If that's all you're looking for to hear God, then you don't hear God. See, all of those things were effects of God passing by. That wasn't the voice of God. See, we get into church and we see the great excitement, the shouting, the running, the exuberant feeling that we get. Those are just effects of God passing by. Truthfully, he just wants to speak to you. Get yourself in a place where you can get alone and hear the voice of God. Hear his voice. Elijah. Because listen, he asked that question in the beginning, right? What's it going on? It says here and after the fire, a still small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entering of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him and said, here's what he says, what doest thou here, Elijah? So again, God asked him the very same question. Now, God told him to come outside the cave. So was God talking about the physical location where Job was at? Maybe. But was God talking about his internal location, where he is at internally? Because remember, this is Mount Sinai. If this is Mount Sinai, this is where the Spirit of God dwelled, and Moses saw God. Backside it says, but he saw God. So wouldn't it be feasible to think that, well, I want to be where the Spirit of God's at, right? So I don't necessarily, I think it is the physical location. Like, why are you running? Like, if you're running from God, running from where God called you. But I also feel like maybe it's also the internal. Why are you in an emotional place where God doesn't want you to be at? Why are you in a place where you're overwhelmed? You allowed yourself to get there. You have control over that. And a lot of people say, well, I don't really have control. Well, yeah, you do. You do. You have control over your anger. You have control whether or not you choose to be happy. Things are not always grand. Things are not always the best. And life, tends to give us some twists and turns that are unexpected, and we have to manage through it. But it's where we choose to be at in those moments determines where we're at. Whether I choose to be depressed and upset about my conditions and situations, or I choose to go forward. Listen, it's all about our choice. God's saying, where are you at? He understands that you're juggling all these different hats, and maybe you've picked up more hats than you really can wear. I've got a pile of hats. A pile of hats that I don't wear. They're work hats, right? We get them all the time. I just don't wear them. So maybe you've picked up a bunch of hats you don't wear, or you shouldn't be wearing. The truth of the matter is, he's wanting to speak in a small, still voice to you. Can you hear him? This is it. This is Pastor Danner with Coffee and the Word, and I hope you've been encouraged. And if you find yourself on that storm of life, cry out and he'll answer.